Hi, and welcome to All Things Cozy with Matt
and Jillian.
We are a bi-weekly podcast that, for Halloween at least, is about everything grim, grisly, and ghastly. This week, we're getting spooked in the stacks, as we'll be discussing a few ghoulishly good reads. We'll be indulging our inner creepy child by revisiting the work of Alvin Schwartz, most famous for writing scary stories to tell in the dark. And just like Sarah Sanderson, we'll be running amok through the bewitching backstory of how the Disney classic got made with the newly released book on the subject, Witches Run Amok, the oral history of Disney's Hocus Pocus. And Jillian, someone must have lit the black flame candle because joining us today is the author of Witches Run Amok, Shannon Carlin. Welcome to our Halloween party, Shannon.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you here. And also, listeners who haven't read the book yet, we are in the book ourselves.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Shannon was so kind to interview us bozos about Hocus Pocus, and it was such a delight. The book is phenomenal. We love Hocus Pocus, and we know a lot about it because we watch it annually. But I learned so much about the production and also the cultural impact from your book. So really excited to dive in and chat with you about how it happened and some of the juicy tidbits in Witches Run Amok.
Thank you for landing your broom here.
Yes, it only goes certain places, and this felt right during this season.
Before we summon our books, round of applause for that, half commitment. Let's open the veil to all that's making us feel spooky this week. Jillian, kick us off. What is making you feel spooky?
Spirit Halloween wants SNL to eat its words after the show skewered the franchise for opening stores only to bounce, quote unquote, when spooky season is over. Spirit Halloween announced they'll open 10 new stores under the festive banner Spirit Christmas and will sell Christmas decor and offer in-store experiences like writing letters to Santa, as CNBC reported. So this is making me feel really spooky because I'm seriously concerned, like legitimately concerned. It's as if McDonald's said, yeah, we'll open a funeral home. Olive Garden wants to open a construction business. We don't need it. We don't want it. We didn't ask for it. I'm morbidly curious. I will go. I will check it out. But why we love Spirit Halloween is because it is a failure of epic proportions. We love to get the vampire makeup that will give us a rash, maybe send us to urgent care or something like that.
Yes, we love that.
It's a tradition. Last minute, I went last year to get a cat costume, and I think my ears fell apart by the end of the night, and I wasn't doing anything wild and crazy with my ears. Just clarify and make that crystal clear. I was home by 9:30 or something. I think Spirit Halloween needs to stay in its lane. I think it's great when people experiment, try new things. But I'm wary. I'm a little concerned. I don't know if it's going to be fake snow that sends people to the hospital.
If we're on trend, it might be. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm down for any kind of festive holiday store. But for me, I agree. Part of the charm is that it's here and then it's gone. And the lingering makes it feel like if you're already there in the carcass of a department store for half the year at that point, then you're kind of already a brick and mortar store that's always there pretty much. And so there's something just so wacky about this carnival that comes to town, in 50 locations in your area, takes over a little hermit crab, just fills into every retail space that's been abandoned and then leaves as quickly as it came in. I feel like the Christmas thing might ruin its allure a little bit, but it does sound like they're doing a slow rollout because 10 new stores for Spirit is basically,
Oh, you're right.
a 0.1% of their stores. We'll see how it goes. This is a very early trial period for them.
Yeah, and I think Spirit Halloween needs to lean in to not being so serious about itself. Because even the SNL skit, they made a costume for SNL and it said, oh, losing steam in popular culture or something. It made all these little zingers, quote unquote. And I think it just needs to accept itself for what it is. That's why people love it.
Jillian, that's just their wicked sense of humor.
Yeah.
We don't get it. That's the problem. They're
Yeah.
so funny.
Yes, exactly. Whipping up jokes like potions left and right.
Speaking of whipping up things left and right, no one whips up things faster, more furiously than Hallmark Channel makes movies. And Hallmark Channel has been doing fall movies for a long time. Listeners of our show will know that I am obsessed with their what used to be called Fall Harvest lineup, which is like romance movies with a fall theme, developed into a new banner called Fall Into Love. I'm sure you're all riveted by this Hallmark history. But now they're actually, for the first time, as far as I've been a watcher for the last decade, really incorporating Halloween and naming it. In the past, they were hesitant to do that. And they're even diving into some spooky ghost stuff. I'm going to name two titles that just came out this month on Hallmark Channel that really actually involve Halloween. And people talk about Halloween. They don't like just, we're going to the Harvest Festival, and that's all we do in this town. So, Autumn in Apple Hill is all about a woman throwing a Halloween party in order to save a dilapidated inn she inherited from her grandparents. And then there's Haunted Wedding, which is about a wedding also at an inn that is interrupted by a ghost who thinks the groom is hers. And so even the little symbol on the corner of the screen says Hallmark Halloween when these movies are on. So I am so excited about the inclusion of Halloween. It's a new dawn. It's a new day.
Don't tell my mom's husband, who was the biggest Hallmark fan. I'll be like, you're letting the devil inside your house. He won't even look at the Halloween decorations on the lawn.
Yeah, Hallmark is cracking a window for the devil for sure. They are letting in a little bit. Just a little horned tails creeping through with a couple of movies a year now.
Yeah, that's basically like one of the characters in Jaeger bombed or something. There's like a truly like crazy town for them to be dipping their toes into Halloween. But I'm excited. I'm curious to see how they're handling that.
I feel like they're stepping on Lifetime. Like, Lifetime doesn't have Halloween movies, but all of the movies are so scary. They're all the most frightening movies of all time because they're
Absolutely.
all woman goes to school and is attacked. Woman goes, like, it's just everyone is being attacked. So I'm like, I feel like Lifetime, side note to this, should really lean into Halloween because I think they have a great slate that they could be using that I feel like they're not taking advantage of.
Oh, it's overlooked for sure. They've produced at least 100 plus. The nanny takes over the wife's life and kills her and wants to get with the husband or something. Yeah, they have that market cornered. So Hallmark should be prepared to go to war.
You will have to choose sides.
I think Hallmark is prepared to eat their Halloween candy for sure. Shannon, how about you? What is making you feel spooky?
I'm going to go pretty traditional, and I'm going to say the Monster Mash. It is the one time of year where you can put that on without people thinking you are a crazy person. Though I know that the Monster Mash, there is a Christmas version of it, which is trash, and we will not talk about it. I could have picked I Put a Spell on You, but my feeling is that is more than a Halloween song. You could play that any time of year. It's just a great song, no matter what version. But I feel like the Monster Mash, it makes me think about being in high school when my best friend and I, there was a dance and we tried to request it at a Halloween dance and the person said no. And we were like, at what other time of the year can you play this song? There is no other time of the year. And therefore, Halloween to me is Monster Mash season. You can play that song 5 times a day. I think I did play it a couple of times today just because it's like, what can you listen to that song otherwise? It's not a song you can play any other time. There's a very strict season of that song.
First things first, that person who denied you needs to be in jail immediately if they're not already.
I assume they are. I assume that was the road to prison. That was their first mistake, and they just kept making mistakes. That's all I can assume. I will never Google them. That's just what I know about them.
Right. But I think you hit on something really important, is that quintessential school Halloween song. I can remember it in the classroom and making crafts and eating Halloween-themed food. It's just so cozy. It's a classic, and it's not something you really get sick of, that voice. What a environment it creates. Spooky but cozy, just a lot of fun. Good pick.
Yeah, there's something you want a cider or something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It puts you in the Halloween spirit for sure. And what other Halloween song is basically a roll call of all of our favorite monsters?
It's so true. I don't know if I've ever actually done the Monster Mash, though, like, which maybe I shouldn't say after I just talked about how great the song is. I'm not sure that I've ever physically tried to do the Monster Mash or even truly know how to do it. Maybe that's something I need to do this year. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll learn it. That will be my goal for this Halloween season. But either way, like you said, it's a great ode to our favorite monsters.
Speaking of some of our favorite monsters, from Halloween coziness to just a bunch of hocus pocus, let's hear a little bit more about Shannon's new book. Shannon, you are a pop culture journalist who has written for Time, Rolling Stone, Vulture, and more. And you recently wrote Witches Run Amok, The Oral History of Hocus Pocus, which uses interviews with the cast and crew behind the film to reconstruct its journey from script to screen, as well as analyzing its impact on its fans and the culture at large. I personally learned so many new tidbits about the making of the movie I never knew before. I had no idea that they had to manage real dirt on the set and that that dirt rotted and informed future set dressing. I love details like that. And also some of the filming that you think is so iconic, like the I Put a Spell on You musical number, just really getting a day for them to wrap that up was crazy to learn about. I feel compelled to mention, although I wonder if you're listening to the show, why you don't know this already, but no judgment. For the uninitiated, Hocus Pocus is a 1993 Disney comedic family film starring Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy about three witches brought back to life who try to steal the souls of all the children in Salem in order to achieve eternal youth. Typical family fare. So, Shannon, how did you first come across Hocus Pocus? And what drew you to the film that led to this incredible journey to documenting its history?
I think, like most people, it came to me when I was a kid. I am of age where I could have seen it in the theater, but like everyone else did not. My mom rented it for me and my sister when we were kids, and probably when it was first on VHS, going to a Blockbuster and getting it. And I fell in love with it. I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I talk about this in the book, but it just feels like it's always been there. It's just been in my life. It didn't have a beginning. It sort of arrived and it's never gone away. I didn't realize, I think, even until I was doing the book, how much of a phenomenon it was and how long it took for it to become the phenomenon it was. I think I just assumed it was always popular because I loved it and I was of age and I knew a lot of friends who loved it. And there wasn't the internet at that time. So to me, I knew about it. So everyone must know about it. You know, it was one of those things. And I think the journey to write the book was a long one. I didn't plan to write a book. It wasn't really something I thought about. I'm a journalist. That's my background. I had written a story for the website Bustle tied to the 25th anniversary, specifically an oral history about the I Put a Spell on You scene. And I spoke to Thora Birch and David Kirshner and Doug Jones and a few other people. And it was from there that an agent reached out years later, 5 years later, reached out and was sort of like, would you like to do more with this? And I sort of was like, maybe I do. And then started to sort of look into what had been written about the movie and what I thought about the movie. It was something that I feel like I'd never done any real deep digging into because it's a movie that I liked as a kid. And I think even though I would watch it pretty much yearly, I never really thought that much more about it. I never thought about how it was made, even though that's something I love to think about, but it was just a childhood favorite. So I think this book really gave me a chance to dig into the real stories behind it. I know you mentioned, some of the cast stories. I love those little stories about how things are made and what goes into them. And I think something that is clear about this movie is that there was so much craft and skill put into it that maybe people miss if they've only really seen it as a kid or think of it as just a nostalgic movie of their childhood. There's so much great craft in it that I think was something I really wanted to focus on when I was writing the book.
To have someone who appreciates the lore makes the book that much more enjoyable. And there's just so many fun tidbits like Matt highlighted. I'm curious, what was your favorite part? I know it's really hard to pick. Favorite part of writing the book, and why was it interviewing us?
Don't really answer that.
Obviously, I interviewed a lot of people, and it started with trying to get cast and crew members, but then it was expanding to talk to people who had other insight into the movie where, fans, drag performers, Salem locals. It was trying to cast a wide net to talk to as many people as I could to sort of understand, I think, what we all want to know, which is why is this movie so popular now, especially once it was not popular at the time. And it took a long time for it to become popular. I think most people would say it took 20 years for that movie to really find its audience in the way it has. And it seems to be getting bigger and bigger. It's really hard to say what was my favorite. I think I spoke to about 90 to 100 people, did multiple interviews with a lot of those people. I think in every interview I did, there was something that someone said where I was like, ooh, that is really good. That's a great tidbit. That's a story I want to dive into. Oh, okay, they said something that they brought another person up in. Now I want to find that person and ask them about this. I felt like it was a fun little puzzle, but it was also like I felt like a little detective because I was trying to draw out these stories. Luckily, this is a movie where what has been written about it is a lot of fun fact pieces. So it's a lot of the same information. So some of my job was to be like, can I confirm some of these things? Because I think sometimes things get reported so often that they just become, oh, yeah, that's true. And then you find out actually it's not true at all. So I was trying to get into some of those, but I think there was a ton of room for me to discover new things. And I think by interviewing all these people, I was able to find some of that new stuff in there, which again, hearing people tell me, oh, there was stuff I didn't know in there is obviously exactly what I want to hear, because that was my main goal, was to be like, I know this movie has such a fan base and those fans know so much about the movie. So to have them tell me, I didn't know this, is the best compliment I could get. One of the weirdest stories I heard was about Michael Jackson, who obviously was a huge pop star at the time. And he wanted to buy the Sanderson house and bring it to Neverland. And you're just like, what a weird world we live in.
Yeah.
that was like a possibility that this person was just going to do this. To that, I feel like Vanessa Shaw tells a story also connected to Michael Jackson, who obviously was just so big at the time that he has these weird connections to a lot of pop culture at that time. But that Macaulay Culkin wanted her to come to the Home Alone 2 screening, and she got on the phone with him, and Michael Jackson was sort of the ones trying to set up that phone call. It's so strange. When she told me, I could not imagine where that story was going, which goes, I don't even want to spoil it, but it goes to a very strange place by the end, because the reason she doesn't go to the Home Alone 2 premiere is just the oddest reason. I feel like you have to read it to know you're not going to expect that's where it's going. But I feel like it's weird things like that. I tend to love the stories that are just like real weird factoids. Those were my favorite things to hear, where I was just like, oh, that story did not go where I was expecting it. Those were my favorite moments from speaking to people.
And what's so great about the stories in the book is that they're from the horse's mouth. These are the words of the interview subjects, and it creates a really cool conversational quality. All of the quotes are on the topic of the chapter, but they flow so beautifully into each other and tell a complete story from all these different perspectives, sometimes directly conflicting with what one other person had kind of said. People acknowledging like, this other guy is going to say this, but I don't know about that. And it creates a really rich tapestry, a full picture for fans that you wouldn't otherwise get from someone filtering it through and then putting it into their own words and kind of flattening it. You get all of the texture of each individual perspective on what was going on. And I think that's such a beautiful and fun part. It's almost like a written podcast. We can do a dramatic reading when you're ready,
That's well
Shannon.
said.
We'll play our part. It feels like a transcript of people in conversation about this incredible movie that, you're right, I think a lot of millennials, we consider it as just a fact of life. Like, everyone loves Hocus Pocus, right? And then you talk to anyone older than we are, and they're like, what are you talking about? That kind of came and went. I barely remember that. But because of home video, because of Disney Channel, all these repeat viewings, it was such a huge cultural milestone for us. Speaking of all the different breadcrumbs that you were picking up and following all those threads to getting the interviews and finding new information, what was the most challenging part of writing the book for you?
Obviously, sometimes it's just getting them to make time. I did not have anyone refuse me, but sometimes you just cannot get in touch with people. You can just not find, even if you have the right contact, you just might never get a response from that email. You have more time when you write a book. I had about a year, but yet I could have used another 6 months, to get some of the people that I really wanted to. One person I really wanted to get that seemed like a long shot, and there was like a moment when I thought I was going to get them and then didn't, was Steven Spielberg, which maybe people who've read the book or who know a little bit about Hocus Pocus, there's been this rumor for a long time that he was somehow connected to the movie, that maybe he was going to direct it at one point. And it's really hard to find any information about that. And in fact, two people who worked on the movie, Mick Garris, the screenwriter, and David Kirshner, creator, and also worked on the script, have very different views on whether he was involved. One of them, Mick Garris, says that, yeah, they went to a meeting and they spoke to Steven Spielberg and he was going to do it. And then because they were working with Disney and he was at Amblin, his company, which was obviously a competitor, he didn't. And David Kirshner tells a different story about how, they were never involved because he had a falling out with Spielberg for reasons that are quite interesting, and I won't spoil here. And I tried to get Steven Spielberg to be like, can we get him to tell me if it's true? And I came very close and then didn't. And so this is my appeal, obviously, to Steven Spielberg to let me know if he has.
If there's any podcast, it'll be ours.
He loves coziness. You can tell that he's a cozy guy. But if anyone knows him or can get in touch with him, let him know. I'm really still wondering about this and would love to have that in a new edition if he can tell me. Even if the answer is simply no, I just want to know. I just want to know.
Mhm.
But I feel like maybe that was some of the difficulty. I think also just like putting it together was really fun. I don't want to say it was difficult, but obviously I did a lot of interviews. There was interviews I did that were 2 hours long, and you're trying to pick through them and find the right quotes. So I think maybe just judgment calls, things that you're like, is this an interesting quote? Is this a better quote? Trying to figure out which ones to use. Sometimes people bring up stories that are out of left field and finding ways to put them in because they're really just interesting factoids that you want to get in there. You can tell maybe where those stories come in the book because you'll see me sort of write something to make them fit into sometimes the conversation. There's some sort of transitional sentence where you can tell this is a piece I really wanted to get in there, but maybe didn't have quite another connection that I could use. So I would say, yeah, maybe judgment calls was something that was difficult because I'm working on it. My judgment could be different than someone else. I think that's the worst and the best part, right? Is that someone else could have looked through all of my information, all of my transcripts, and could have put together a totally different book because it's so much about a judgment call. And I think that's like at once fascinating and also horrifying when you're working on it because you're like, what if I'm making the wrong choices? What if this isn't the right lane to go down for this topic? I feel proud of the book, but I'm sure I will look back in a year, 2 years, 5 years and say, there was this great story. Why didn't I put that in? Or this great quote, or why did I use this quote? I'm sure I'll have that because that's also just how I am as a person. But I think that maybe was the toughest is just judgment calls.
All the more reason for a revised and expanded edition in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think your judgment was spot on because I love the book. And I think it's such an awesome achievement that anyone who's maybe not watched the movie could appreciate this book. And then, like you said, the super fans can. And you really did them justice because for them to reach out, that's a tip of the witch hat if there was one.
I will say, I think it's a fan base that is quite gentle and kind and has been very kind to me. My experience with them was not the sort of fan base that felt like they wanted to gatekeep this. You know, there was people who told me if someone doesn't know Hocus Pocus, I give them a copy. They want more people to like this movie, which I think is kind of rare with fans because these are people, some of which were like, I saw it in the theater. They've loved it since the very beginning. They were not some of the people that came to it later. You know, I have to say that to them that I feel like they've been very open to the book and also very kind in reaching out. And as a journalist who has gotten the worst messages from people about things I've written, it's been a real change to get people who are very kind and very complimentary of things or very open to say, oh, I didn't know this. Thank you for sharing that. It's been a really cool experience.
Your inbox has turned from terrifyingly spooky to lovingly spooky.
Yes, that is very true.
Before I get to my next question, I just have to highlight my personal tidbit that I loved was Kathy being a super fan of Bet and Bet pulling the Mariah Carey, like, I don't know her. that back and forth. I was cackling in public reading that part. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was hilarious. Bet was just so blasé about it, and that's what made it even funnier, I thought.
Very Bet, I feel like. There was definitely things that people said about Bet that I just thought, I think we could all imagine this. I think we could all envision it. And we brought up the idea that this is all in other people's voices. This is their quotes, which I think to me also lent to it because I think that, yeah, there's sometimes when it's a written out piece, it could get flattened and maybe you lose some of that character. And I feel like when you read it, I hope that, yeah, you can hear Thora is very different in her sort of explaining the movie and her experience to David Kirshner. Like you can tell these are different people and it doesn't hopefully feel like someone has put them through a strainer to sort of make them feel in line with the rest of the book. I feel like everyone, hopefully you can tell these are all very different people who have very different feelings about things and speak in very different ways. And I think the comp to a podcast is very true. I love podcasts. I love hearing people's voices. I love how people say things. I think you can learn a lot from the way people speak. It was really fun to sort of make sure that came through, that even if I was trying to edit, you'll see ellipses in there. There are things that need to be cut because a quote goes on, that I was never trying to put my vocabulary in there, that it was really using what everyone had told me and the way they speak, because I think that is really important. And also to have some people who have never shared their stories about the movie. And it was really important that their voice was very clear, because I think that not that they've been erased from the history or anything, but they just hadn't had a chance to speak about the movie because at the time people weren't looking to talk to them. And so now maybe this was the first time they had really gotten to speak about that experience. And it was really important that, yeah, their voices were clear in the book.
And it's so nice to get to kind of know their personalities better as a fan through their words. And so that was a really amazing opportunity as a reader.
Yeah, and it's a testament to the editing process because their voices really were distinct. And so, obviously, a lot of hard work went into the editing process, but there's also a lot of fun stuff that you got to do. One of that being going to Salem and having a bit of a cast reunion. And so, can you tell us anything about that or any little tidbits you can share?
I was just at an event that was hosted by the cast. It's called It's Just a Bunch of Halloween. It is a Salem event they started last year. It seems like it will be a yearly event. This was their second year. And I think, it had grown. I was not there the previous year, but I'd heard about it and I'd heard that it was a rainy day. This event was outside. People showed up. This time they were indoors. It was a beautiful day, of course. That's always the way it is. But to see them in action was really something special because they were really generous with me and gave me a lot of time. And I was asking them sometimes about things that have happened to them when they were kids, when they were teens, asking them to go back to that time. And also sometimes going back to a time that wasn't the best because it was difficult when it was released and it wasn't popular because this movie was a really fun experience for all of them. And a lot of them thought it was going to be, their ticket to the big time. And it didn't wind up that way. So to see them in action now and enjoying the accolades that they didn't get at the time is something special. They gave everyone so much time and there were so many people there dressed up, so many Jay and Ices, which I loved, so many Jay and Ices. I think that was the most I saw was couples, so many people, but everyone was so kind and they gave their time. And for me, it was like such an interesting experience because I'm not famous. I wrote a book. I'm there with the book, but it was so cool to talk to fans and have them ask me about the experience, but also talk about their experience with this movie and what it's meant to them, which I think, was the point of the book was to sort of hopefully, even if you've seen this movie a million times, that maybe this book will change the way you see it in some ways. There will be new things that you'll see in the movie because you'll know more about how it was made or, you'll just reconsider it in some way. I do hope that people who maybe don't have as much of a relationship with the movie think about reading it too, because I think there's some really interesting stuff just about filmmaking in the 90s, what it was like to do practical effects, which we don't do now, and what it was like at Disney at that time. But this experience to go to Salem and be there with the cast, more of a fly on the wall, in my opinion, because I was just like in awe because I am not a person who loves to be the center of attention or don't think of myself as someone who, why would anyone want me to sign their book or take my picture? It's very strange. It was really cool to see how good at it they were and how much they seemed to enjoy it and how much the fans clearly enjoyed seeing them. It was really a wild experience. I would gladly do it again. It was a really great community. So I would love to continue to meet these people who I know love this movie. And some of them brought their own books, which is really cool that they had already bought it and were there to talk to me about it. I loved that.
What a special moment. And I think the movie, your book is evergreen. I can imagine someone going to the bookstore, picking it up, going home, reading it, maybe turning on the movie, settling with some cider. Your book, to me at least, is now part of that whole Hocus Pocus annual Halloween experience. And that will just live on. And that's so special. So I really hope that you revel in that accomplishment. How incredible and cozy and sweet. I'm glad you got to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah, that's very kind of you to say. There is such a community around this movie. And like you said, I love the idea. And I hope if someone's doing this, I want to know the sort of reading the book and watching the movie or going back to the scenes that maybe they're talking about. That would be the dream. I'm such a nerd who loves to read movie books and then go watch the movie after I've read something and really dig into it. For all my movie nerds out there, please let me know if you're doing that, if you're watching and reading.
If you have an Instagram, they need to start tagging you.
Yes.
Oh, I have told many people that I have no shame. I will retweet, I will repost. If you send me something, especially if you just send me a picture of the book, I will repost it. I'm so excited to see people enjoying it. So honestly, tag away.
Get at it.
Well, on the topic of sharing enthusiasm and love for Hocus Pocus, where can people keep up with your writing and your work and find you on social media?
I am a journalist by day. I still continue to write. I write a lot about books now. If you are someone who likes to keep up with new releases or what's coming out, I do a lot of that for Time right now, mostly for their website. And yeah, you can follow me. My social media, I feel like, is one of those names where it's like when you think about it now and you have to say it out loud is just really obnoxious because there's underscores. So it's at new_girl_Friday. But I think you could find me just by searching my name at this point because I feel like I've tried to make it easier. So you don't need to know anything other than my name. But yes, please tag me even if you don't like the book. It's fine. You can tell me. It's okay. I'll take it.
We're only going to share love online. We're going to be kind online, listeners. Also, we're going to hop on our broomsticks to your local bookstore and pick up a copy of Witches Run Amok, The Oral History of Hocus Pocus. Shannon, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us about the process of writing the book and your experiences. It's such a special text for fans, and it's really lovely to have this in the world.
Yes, thank you. And I say a billion times because it's so well deserved. And I had the best time reading the book. The
Absolutely.
best time.
It's so
Oh.
hard. Any book to happen is such a phenomenal amount of work. So congratulations on getting released and having this book out in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. And please, thank you both for being a part of it. I was lucky enough when I was doing my research to search for who had been talking about the movie and also the all new sequel. And that's how I came to you two and listened to your podcast and had such a great time listening to it that I was sort of like, I want to speak to those two because I think they're going to be like super fun to talk to, but also have some insight that I am going to really revel in. And I was right on both counts. And it was just such a pleasure speaking with you now, but back then. And I feel like I hope your listeners, if they read the book, enjoy seeing what you had to say about your own connection to it, which was some of my favorite stuff and some of your great insight into the movie as people who love it, but also have thought about it, have really thought about it as much as I probably was when I was writing this book. It's been such a nice experience. I will say every person I spoke to was so kind. I feel like something maybe people don't know is that people are doing it out of the goodness of their heart to speak to you. They are not getting paid. They are really giving themselves over to a stranger who is going to ask them personal questions and ask them to get into things that they may or may not want to talk about. And everyone was just so kind and helpful in the process. So I really can't thank every person who's listed in the book enough because I've worked hard, but a lot of people gave a lot of time. I called people many times and spent hours with them. And that's a lot of time, again, to give a stranger.
We are grateful to you for
honored.
being on the case, tracking down the info.
What they don't know is I'm wearing a detective outfit right now.
Yes, magnifying glass.
that's how I dress now.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you are interested in hearing our thoughts on, yes, you heard that right, Hocus Pocus and the all-new sequel, which is a book that came out before Hocus Pocus 2, we do have an All Things Cozy episode all about that.
Please listen. It's so good.
I'm going to add those links to our show notes if you want to go back into the All Things Cozy archives to hear more Hocus Pocus thoughts. But thank you again, Shannon, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And listeners, get this book. It's so fun.
Thank you so much,
Shannon.
Well, that was so much fun to talk to Shannon. It was great having her on. But Jillian, I think it's time we turn our attention to a few more stories that are quite a scream. While Jillian and I were in our nightmarish nooks reading the Hocus Pocus book, we also decided to dig up some long-dead childhood memories via the writing of Alvin Schwartz. Alvin Schwartz is the master of the macabre. He has haunted readers for generations. Best known for his Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series, Schwartz collected a chilling array of folklore, urban legends, and ghost stories that continue to send shivers down our spines. Born in Brooklyn in 1927, Schwartz's knack for gathering ghoulish tales led him to write over 50 books. He had a deep interest in oral tradition and folklore, using his bone-chilling books to unearth eerie tales that had been passed down through generations. But beware, his stories are not for the faint of heart. With Stephen Gammell's terrifying illustrations paired with Schwartz's eerie prose, his Scary Stories books quickly became a spooky sensation, loved by kids but sometimes cursed by adults worried about nightmares. Schwartz truly knew how to dig up a good ghost story, and while he passed away in 1992, his legacy still haunts us today. Keep your flashlights close. You never know what creepy classic Schwartz might be whispering from beyond the grave. Before we dive into our thoughts on Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and any memories we have reading it as kids, let's start with a terrifying tale close to my telltale heart, In a Dark, Dark Room. So this one is an I can read book level 2, meaning I can read with help. So it features 7 spine-tingling stories about men with long teeth, girls who keep their head on with a green ribbon, you know that one, and yes, the titular Dark, Dark Room. So for me, this is the one that actually, of the two, I know Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark of Schwartz's work is the more famous text, but this is the one that really captured me as a kid. And The Green Ribbon became a huge classic growing up, the story of a girl who, if you take the ribbon off her neck, her head just falls right off. It ends with the immortal line, and Jenny's head fell off. But for my money, the book stuck in my memory because of the poem In a Dark, Dark Room, in which the repetitive nature of the text is like in a dark, dark blank, in a dark, dark blank. Along with Dirk Zimmer's dark and textured illustrations, they pull you in page by page until finally, a ghost pops out at you. Jillian, I was curious, have you read this before, or was this like me imposing my childhood on you?
I know. I think that when we were talking about it, you had mentioned Alvin, and I don't recall his other book very much. And that is the other one we're going to discuss, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I was more familiar with In a Dark, Dark Room because of the green ribbon. I distinctly remember reading that when I was a kid, and that's my favorite story out of that book. And I remember being terrified by it, but also so deeply interested and intrigued because I'd never read anything like that before, obviously, as a kid. So when I revisited it, I checked it out of my local library, which Matt knows this, but I also checked out our book club pick, The Halloween Tree, which is also in the children's section. So, and it's in my new library, by the way. I had to sign up because I just moved. And so these librarians have only seen me go to the children's section twice. And I had to ask for help each time. I struggle to find books. So I was also reading this on the Land Railroad. So I'm sure people are seeing me like, I can read level 2 and wondering like, who is this woman? Anyway, so no, long story short, you did not force this on me. I welcomely walked into this dark, dark room.
I'm also proud of you for walking into that cold, cold library that really shamed you for wanting to read some young adult literature.
Right.
Which stories stuck out to you the most when you were revisiting it as an adult?
I wanted to say the green ribbon, but that's such a classic. And I thought to myself, actually, that would be an awesome Halloween costume. How easy would that be? And then it would really get the millennials riled up. So I might consider that this year because it's so simple.
You are 100% right. It's genius. You literally just have to put like a silk green ribbon around your neck. Like if it's like a nice
Yeah.
bright green, whoever knows that is what you're doing is really cool and you want to meet them anyway. What a great kind of like, if you know it, you know, Halloween costume.
Right, exactly. So I was like, oh, should I put a name tag on? But no, it's for the folks who get it, the OGs.
Are you from Forrest Gump, Jenny? Like what
Yeah,
were you
you're
supposed to
right.
be?
My name's Jenny. Maybe not. So my favorite out of the book, it's a quintessential ghost story. I don't think I'm going to be spoiling it because I really, in reality, who's going to be going to the library like me and checking this out? So a man comes across a boy drenched from the rain and he offers him a ride home. The man offers a boy a sweater because obviously he's really cold and shivering because it rained. And then the man says, oh, I'll come back for it tomorrow. But when the man goes to the boy's house to retrieve it, the boy's mother answers the door and lets the man know that her son is dead. So the man, stunned, returns to the cemetery where he first found the boy and sees his sweater draped over the young boy's headstone. And when looking at it now, it's kind of a cliche. Oh, they're really dead the whole time. But I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. And there's one in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark that also is reminiscent of this whole vibe of, oh, they're actually dead the whole time. But it's eerie. It makes me wonder, maybe I met a ghost once upon a time.
Jillian, I have something to tell you.
Right?
I've been dead this whole time for
I'll
7
find his-
years of this podcast.
I'll find like your cozy mug in, I don't know, my bedroom or something.
What a sick mind that would dream me up to
I
talk
know.
to you about
No.
random cozy
Sick
stuff.
bed. No, I think that truly would be the best ghost you could dream up. Cozy, responsible, doesn't give you many spooks.
Speaking of other ghosts that are dreamed up, Schwartz also wrote Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and there are multiple of these. There's more Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. There's a series of them. They follow a pattern of being a collection of scary stories, and in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, they have categories like, ah, or he heard the footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose, other dangers, and again, ah, all accompanied by Stephen Gammell's smoky charcoal and ink illustrations that are so creepy that it made it one of the most challenged books in the 90s as critics attempted to get it removed from library shelves. What I also really find fascinating revisiting it is like how researched it is. It has a sources section in which Schwartz attributes many of the stories to where he found them, whether that be the Big Toe, a traditional scary story in the southern United States that the author learned while serving in the U.S. Navy, or stories like Cold as Clay, which was based on an English ballad. Jillian, which of the stories in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark really gripped you?
I liked The Girl Who Stood on a Grave, which sounds like the most enticing title. It's very literal, but doesn't have any supernatural element to it, which I thought was interesting and different because the message was still terrifying. And it's about a girl who is challenged by her friends to stand in a grave after dark. As legend says, the dead will pull you under with them. The girl, to show up her friends, vows to do it, but she must confirm receipt of the dare by sticking a knife in the grave. The next day, her friends find her body sprawled across the grave. But here's the big twist. It wasn't a ghost who caused her untimely demise. It was her own fear, because she thought when she stuck the knife down into the grave, it caught on her skirt. And so she thought that was the person in the grave grabbing her. I think it's such an interesting concept. Just the power of belief, which I think is what Scary Stories for me is all about. The belief that something else might be out there, the power that these stories hold over you, because you and I have talked about the green ribbon, for example, that still sits with us. So that's why I like this story in particular.
Don't mess with death, because death will get you.
Yeah, don't tempt it.
A lot of these tales, because they are folklore or urban legends, they really do lean into sometimes being moralistic, or they have like little lessons to impart. I wish I could say like, oh, I love the tale of this that really shows you this thing about human nature. And as a young person, it really helped me think about the fact of death in life when I was young. No, I like the silly ones. I like A New Horse, which is about a witch who turns a farmhand into a horse. And the witch rides the farmhand to a party, a little witch party. And then the guy, when she puts the harness like on the post to hitch him up, he escapes it. I guess the little harness is enchanted. We'll go with that. A lot of these stories like 2 pages, so you have to fill in a lot of the blanks as the reader.
Right.
So this guy then does some magic spell to her while she's cutting a rug in the witch's party, which at that point, why don't the other witches help you? But anyway, he rides her and rides her back to another barn and trades her to a farmer. And when he hitches the horse and the harness falls off, it's his wife.
Oh my God.
What a twist.
I love these twists.
And she has horseshoes stapled onto her hands and feet.
Oh my God. No, that's a classic. That's a really good one. But also seriously unhinged.
Yes, just really goofy. I also like some of the more like, these are recipes for doing this thing that you love in childhood. So there's one that's The Dead Man's Brains, and it provides instructions for that Halloween game. Jillian, I'm sure you played this before, where you have someone put their hand in like a bowl of something, like maybe it's peeled grapes, and they say, these are eyeballs from dead people. Did you do that as a kid, Jillian?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can envision it now. And that's so fun. It's creative, maybe a waste of food, but very creative.
Waste of food.
Let me eat those grapes.
It never occurred to me, the adults cringing at like all the wasted food, because no one's going to want to eat those peeled grapes after a bunch of grimy kid hands grab them for an afternoon.
No, or no one's going to take out a spit apple or something like, oh, let me slice it up.
Yeah, the cold spaghetti intestines.
No, but hey, it's a lasting memory because we both remember it. So that's all that counts.
Yes, I remember. I have a distinct memory of doing that game in like a YMCA little Halloween party. And I was like peeking to see what it really was and just like ruining all the fun and being like, they can't deceive me. I'm smarter than they are. I was a very arrogant child.
Let's recreate it. I'll come up with some new concoctions.
Yeah, it really blindfolded me. So I really
Yes.
can't. I really can't be sure.
Like go on IG Live.
Matt thinks he's really touching eyeballs. Jillian, thanks for going down a little bit of memory lane here. I just thought while we were talking about a new Halloween classic in Witches Run Amok, to turn our attention to some Halloween classics of our childhood, specifically the work of Schwartz, and celebrate these books that really helped shape us into the Halloween lovers we are today.
I had a blast not only talking to Shannon, but just reliving this part of my youth. It was so fun to reread these books. Very cozy and comforting.
And listeners, we would love to hear what is on your nightstand for Halloween. What are you reading to put yourself in the Halloween spirit? Let us know on our Facebook group. We are at All Things Cozy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. The words on these pages may have been scary, but they're no match for our next segment, Words of Wickedness. Normally, if you're new to the show and you're not sure what we're doing here, we do Words of Warmth because we're cozy, but it's Halloween, so it's wickedness. Jillian, what is your quote this week you'd like to share?
My quote is from a classic scary author, R.L. Stine, who said, "I was funny. I've always been funny. I never planned to be scary. That was actually an accident." I thought it was a really funny quote. I don't know, it made me giggle a lot just to think, I don't know, starting out want to be a little comedian and then fell into be one of the most popular scary authors for kids ever. But I also think it's how they say that people who are really funny have an open door to sadness. And I think it's the same thing for scary things too. To truly understand scary and horror, you have to be able to understand on a level that maybe other folks don't. And you have to have a good sense of humor about it to actively engage with it and to take scary things and having that moment of relief. Because I also read another quote from him that said, there's always that comedic pull, whether it's really obvious and hokey or something a little bit more like even in Hocus Pocus, there's so many comedic moments to offset the scary. So for me, that goes hand in hand. So I thought that was interesting how he said it was almost like an accident because it doesn't seem very accidental to me, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to chew on, like candy corn.
I agree. Being funny and being scary are similar insofar as like they both involve surprises. They surprise your audience, like you mentioned, very alike in that way. And so I'm not surprised that having one skill easily transferred to the other. My quote is also from a master of horror, the Alvin Schwartz we've been talking about for half of this episode. Alvin once said, telling scary stories is something people have done for thousands of years. For most of us, like being scared in that way. Since there isn't any danger, we think it's fun. And I like how lighthearted this take is because Schwartz is right to point out that part of the love of horror, the genre, whether that's a movie or scary stories that we read in a book, is that we get to do that in a cozy way on the comfort of our couch or in our bed before we go to sleep. It's a way to experience some thrills, but know that ultimately those things can't get us, but we get a little bit of that fear training, I almost want to call it, because there's like a way it exercises a part of our natural instincts. And so it highlights the fun of getting to enjoy a scary story. And I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw that quote also on the, if you don't know if you picked it up on the jacket of the book, because that also really resonated with me too. When he said that, because I think he said that also we can enjoy scary things when there's no threat. And I think sometimes being scared is even a privilege, like during this kind
Mhm.
of season, like the fact that your life is comfortable enough where you can sit with a bowl of popcorn and truly enjoy something like that.
Wow, goth Julie
Relax.
Angeli popping out here. So
Really?
dark in this take. I'm kidding. That's a totally normal thing to say.
Okay, I don't want to think of all the kids.
Won't someone please think of the children?
So next time I sit down and turn a horror movie, I'll be thinking of Alvin.
Aw, well said. Can you smell the eerie autumn scent on the wind? It's time for our Halloween candle review. This week we are burning Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by North Avenue Candles. First and foremost, I want to shout out Norma G for this recommendation. Norma, you came in clutch because I knew I had to get a book themed Halloween candle for us to review on this episode. And you had shared this site for another literary connection to some of the Poe offerings they have. And then I saw they have this, and we're talking about those books, and how perfect is this? So you made it happen. Thank you so much, Norma. A little bit about this candle. So, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a limited edition candle inspired by Alvin Schwartz's celebrated trilogy of horror stories with label art featuring modernized and updated versions of the iconic artwork that scared us all as children. We didn't talk that much about it we weren't talking about the books themselves, but Stephen Gammell's illustrations are just so creepy that even as an adult, I find myself flipping really quickly past them because I find it so unpleasant to look at them for any length of time,
Agreed.
which is just why they're so legendary and effective. But it's a scented candle. The haunting blend is an earthy, woodsy, smoky scent, perfect for spooky season. The way they label the smell is churned earth and funeral pyre, a blend of grasses, rain, smoky pine, cedarwood, and earth. When I first smelled it, like when I got out of the can, listeners will know we recently reviewed a foraging candle that the whole thing was like it was like you're foraging in the dirt for like mushrooms. And so it had like a dirt smell as well. And that one was really authentic smelling. And I got like a nice whiff of that authentic dirt from this right away. But as I'm burning it, the perfume of the cedar wood and the smoky pine is coming out. And it feels like I'm in an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark around the fire. I'm smelling the burnt wood and the autumn air and the moist mulch, just like in Hocus Pocus, that's rotting and all the actors are gagging. I really can't recommend this candle enough. It is a wonderful scent of just all these nice natural smells that make you feel like you're going through a haunted forest after a rain.
That sounds absolutely intriguing, and I wanted to smell it too. You mentioned, Are You Afraid of the Dark? That sold me. That campfire, I need to be there. And maybe that's another episode for down the road. So I don't think
Yeah.
we've ever done that. That would be really fun.
Definitely. We need to do that. And with your R.L. Stein quote, I'm realizing we need to do an episode on Goosebumps, which I
Oh,
was
yeah.
obsessed with as a kid. So I think we have our next topic for Halloween already sorted. But
Yes,
yeah, this
agreed.
is so wonderful, the smell. you're not going to go wrong with a nice woody scent in my book. It's a very nice smell and spooky.
Definitely. And thanks, Norma G.
And we have a few more thanks to give in our Scream Outs.
Yeah, so thank you to Maddie Kane for this spookily good review. Maddie Kane writes, wonderful show. I've been looking for a comforting show to put me in a better mood for work. The show is sweet, wholesome, and brings a smile, parentheses, sometimes giggle, to my days. I see the effort you put into this lovely show, and I really appreciate it. Much love. Much love right back to you. So we do put a lot of effort in coordinating schedules and all these things, but it's so fun to do because we have wonderful folks like you who listen to us. So thank you for taking the time of your busy day to write us a lovely review.
Yes, thank you so much. And Roxy writes, this podcast is a gem. Very grateful I found it just in time for autumn. It has been a remedy for wanting to decompress from long days and also helps me fall asleep. Thank you for bringing such cozy warmth to my ears. Thank you, Roxy, for bringing such kind words to our ears, or our eyes. Now your ears again. It's a nice feedback loop, isn't it? But it really does bring a smile to our jack-o'-lantern grins when you all leave reviews for us. Wherever you listen to the show, we typically pull from Apple Podcasts, but anywhere you leave a review is very welcome and appreciated. And we do read them on the show. So if you're so moved, leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I'm not giving anyone nightmares. I'm doing the opposite. So that's comforting to know. Thank you, Clara, for joining our Patreon. Matt really does a great Patreon spiel, but I am the post office master, and I really enjoy writing the notes and sending it all to you. Thank you, Claire. I hope you enjoy your sticker and magnet. They're really cute. And I don't know, maybe people need to start tagging us with their merch.
Yes, and you can find that Patreon at patreon.com/allthingscozy. Jillian, I think it's time to close the casket. Another Halloween episode in the grave.
That makes me sad.
Don't be sad. Some girl will stick a knife in this grave and kill herself with fear. We hope you all have a very happy Halloween. Please, one of my favorite times of the year is when our listeners share their jack-o'-lanterns and Halloween decorations. I live for Halloween, so please do all of that. Stay safe out there. Have a spooky and cozy time. Until the next full moon, stay cozy.